The first big trade of the year, Cutter Gauthier traded to the Anaheim Ducks for Jamie Drysdale. We talk all about what both teams are receiving and a lot more on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalikesh, joined by Sebastian High. We've got a big one for you today, the first big trade of the year. We've got Cutter Gauthier being traded to the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for Jamie Drysdale and a second-round pick. We'll be breaking down everything about this trade from the Anaheim side, from the Philadelphia side, what both teams are getting and the prospects they're obtaining in this trade. We'll also talk about some of the surrounding rumors and speculations and thoughts overall about the situation. We've heard a lot over the last couple of days about Cutter Gauthier. So we'll get into all of that. Before we get into any of it, though, today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 life-saving antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's J-A-S-E medical.com. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started here with Cutter Gauthier going to Anaheim. I think we can start with the Cutter Gauthier side. I feel like that's the side that's getting a lot more interest. And I feel like we can pretty easily break down what Gauthier brings to the game, right? We have some differing opinions on what Gauthier's ceiling could be and what type of player he can be, but I think our idea of his play style is the same, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think like we know what his strengths and weaknesses are. What differs maybe is the optimism that we respectively have here. So I'm sure Ducks fans are gonna want to listen to you a little bit more than to me in this episode because you're more optimistic with Gauthier. Yeah. Cutter Gauthier is an excellent prospect. He's a really, really good addition for Anaheim, and he slots in wonderfully. He gives them a ton of versatility down the middle, which they already had in terms of long-term projections. Now you have 4 players that can really conceivably be solid top 6 centermen, which is a tremendous luxury now that you're adding Cutter Gauthier to the mix with Trevor Zegras and Leo Carlsson, and of course Mason McTavish, who's been playing excellent hockey this season. But I think one of the things that makes me optimistic with Gauthier, especially after this trade, is that he's not going to be shooed in or expected to be the 1C long term, which he likely would have been in Philadelphia. And I think that's going to help him a ton, not in terms of necessarily the pressure, but more the expectation of the type of role that he would fulfill. I think if he is at least like long term, mainly going to be playing like a left wing role, maybe in Anaheim, apart from like when injuries force him down the middle. I think that helps him a lot in terms of really focusing on being a high-end shooter and also working a bit on his passing and playmaking game from the perimeter, which he's really good at when he's like asked to do so and when he's looking for his playmaking options. He can put his blinders on big time and only shoot like broken controller style, but he's a fascinating player who has really evolved his game in a really impressive way since draft day. He was a player that I was a lot lower on draft day than I am now. I think I had him ranked like 24th or something. It was very low on him on draft day. But since then, he's added a lot of versatility to his offensive game specifically, which I know that you're a really big fan of. So talk me through a little bit like what parts of his game and what he's added to his toolkit since the draft that makes you more optimistic on his front, especially as like a top line projection potentially than I am.
Yeah, I mean, he has a lot more offensive versatility now, and it's part of the reason why I had ranked him in kind of the 12 to 15 range in his draft year. Is I saw the opportunity for him to develop an offensive versatility that could make him a fantastic complementary player on any line, and it's part of why I like him as a fit with the Ducks so much, because they have so many different stylistic matches for him. If you want him to be that sharpshooter, power forward style of player, you can place him on the left wing beside or on the right wing beside Trevor Zegras and Troy Terry, for example. You've got that guy who can shoot from anywhere and find the postage stamp in Troy Terry. You've got a fantastic creative outlet in Trevor Zegras, and then you can place Cutter Gauthier with them, and he will be the guy who will drive the net, who will take shots from down low, who will consistently put pucks on net and play that more meat and potato style of game. But at the same time, if you place him next to a Mason McTavish or a Leo Carlson, he can also mold his game to that, become more of a distributor, be more of a give and go player. He's always been fairly linear, at least in his draft year. That's what I really saw from him. But watching him in Boston College this year, you can see a lot more intricacy in his game. You can see a bit more chess than checkers, which is what you really want to see in a player like this. And yeah, I mean, overall, that offensive versatility is his ticket to the next level because, like I said, the Ducks have so many stylistic fits, especially at center. Um, Between him, Zegras, McTavish, and Leo Carlson, you've got four centers who all four of them have played wing before. So you can just place
Yeah.
centers per line with one on the wing and have them alternate sides on the faceoff, that kind of thing. Like it's a really good idea to have Gauthier in this lineup. I'm really impressed with the tidy piece of work here from the Ducks and overall by the upgrades in Gauthier's game over the past year, because it's definitely true that in his draft year was a really linear shoot first, power forward, drive the net, overwhelm opponents with speed type of player. And that's what got him picked fifth overall. But he's added some maturity, he's added some versatility and some intricacy to his game that's been really impressive.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think that we're both definitely in line in terms of being impressed with how he's progressed over time. And
Yeah.
if that progression can continue for the next like 2 or 3 years at the current rate, then you're looking at a player that, in my mind, might have that top line upside, even in a lineup as deep as Anaheim's. But I think that there are still some issues in this game. I think like the World Juniors were really like kind of good microcosm of how he plays
Yeah.
and his weaknesses, right? Like we saw in the elimination games a Cutter Gauthier that was, as you said, extraordinarily versatile, like filling in like space really, really well, playing off of his line mates and kind of compensating for their weaknesses. And like there's a reason that he excelled so much when Oliver Moore was put on his line, a player who
Yep.
was playing on the wing, but was kind of playing the center role in the defensive zone, who would drop down low, give that defensive support, because that isn't really Cutter Gauthier's strength. The defensive game has always been a little bit subpar, nothing like awful, but not a big strength at any rate. But yeah, he's fascinating. And then like if you go look up before the elimination games in like the group stage, you saw Cutter Gauthier, who somehow racked up assists despite not passing the puck at all.
He did not
Basically,
pass the puck.
it
That's
was
just
it was all
yeah.
off of rebounds, right? It
Yeah.
was like he was putting pucks
Face off
on net.
wins, that kind of thing.
Face-off wins, exactly, right? And that's a Cutter Gauthier that, in my mind, is a lot more limited in what he could bring to an NHL lineup long term,
Yeah.
where he was shooing himself into a very specific role as like the sniper of the line, and he has such a diverse toolkit that like forcing himself down that very, very narrow path limits his output and limits his potential impact. So I think a big thing for Gauthier moving forward and in his transition to the NHL, which is probably going to happen within the next year,
Yeah.
is to really lean into that versatility. And if he does so, Anaheim got a fantastic player here, and even if he isn't able to do so, you're getting a super fun second liner, anyways. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
a very,
And
very good acquisition here for the Ducks.
for sure. I see the fit next to Zegras and Terry as so natural for him that I think it's just inevitable that he ends up on that top line, like despite himself. But he needs to bring the game that we saw in the elimination games and not the game that we saw from him in the group stage of the World Juniors, because those were two different Cutter Gauthier's. And even though he technically earned more points before the elimination games, a lot of them were just not produced in translatable ways or were produced in ways that reflect more the skill set of his line mates than his. Because Gauthier was just extremely trigger happy. I remember this one shot he took. I even screenshotted and put it on Twitter. I mean, he took a short side shot on a goalie who was leaning short side, who was cheating short side to look at the puck, when he had two wide open teammates, and one in the high slot, one in the low slot for a tip in, and he took a short side high shot. Like,
Yeah.
if you're gonna take a shot, shoot for a rebound on the low blocker side, not on the high glove side. It didn't make sense on that shot. But yeah, I mean, it's small decisions like that that make you kind of wonder what's going on. But in the middle rounds, I was really, really impressed. He was often his line's best player, and at times the Team USA's best player, which is it's a very hard thing to do when you've got a lineup that stacked. But yeah, fairly impressed with what Coder Gauthier brings to the game, and I'm a bit more optimistic with his defensive side than you are. I see a bit more flashes of upside, especially in Boston College. It's really, really clear that he's able to hold his own when he wants
Yeah.
to, but it's a matter of willingness. But overall, yeah, the Ducks are getting an extremely versatile player who's mainly shoot first, but can play a playmaking role, can play a power forward role, can play a two-way role. There are so many different chairs you can put him in, and that's what makes him such a good acquisition for Anaheim. That wraps things up for our first segment. We'll get into our second segment where we talk about Jamie Drysdale and what the Philadelphia Flyers are getting in this trade. We'll get into that after these messages from our sponsors over at Jace Medical. If you're looking for a solution to your medical needs, if you're someone who travels a lot and doesn't have much time to, go to the pharmacy, hit up your doctor, get a prescription, Jace Medical is a great alternative to that. They provide 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use through their Jace case. It's a really useful tool, especially again if you travel and you tend to get sick on the road a lot, like I do. I don't know why. Every time I travel, even if it's if I'm not taking a plane, if it's just a car ride 7 hours south to the USA, I still find a way to get sick. And Jace Medical's Jace case is a great alternative to that and helps you stay healthy and stay on top of your health when these things happen. You can get ongoing care from their physicians or any treatment related questions. It's a doctor created platform that is also doctor recommended. So don't get caught unprepared. Everybody should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones when the unexpected hits. So you can get $20 off on these life-saving antibiotics today from Jace Medical by using the code LOCKED ON at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Check it out. Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll be talking about Jamie Drysdale and what the Philadelphia Flyers are getting here. First, I really love the fit. Jamie Drysdale getting traded to the Philadelphia Flyers fits a need so much for them because their top power play quarterback right now, I believe, is Cam York, and Cam York has not been doing good in that role. So you can have Jamie Drysdale just hop in there, immediately go into that top power play role and do it really, really well because we all know how good offensively he is. One of the most mobile and creative defensemen from the back end. He can find many different ways to hit players in stride and transition. Especially when breaking out the puck. Once in the offensive zone, he shifts his weight really well and finds these little shooting lanes from the point, which makes him really effective on the power play. And overall, just he makes life really easy if you're on the half wall. Overall, he'll get you a puck in your wheelhouse ready for a one timer, or what he'll do mainly is draw a player in and open you up completely. Which can be really, really useful if you're a team like the Flyers and you have those half wall options. Makes life really easy for them. But yeah, I'm really overall impressed with what Drysdale brings. The defensive game has been struggling, and the numbers haven't been great. He has been injured a lot, so that might kind of explain why he was up for grabs. But talk me through what your impressions are of Drysdale and why he's a good fit in Philly.
I think the power play is another, just like you said, is one of the big things there. Like
Yeah,
Jamie Drysdale's 5-on-5 game is definitely still a work in progress, but
hundred
the
percent.
deception, dynamism, and skill that he has with the puck on his stick, especially with space, is a perfect fit for that power play. And you add to that the passing ability that is just so crisp and so accurate when he's on his game. And it makes it scary in 2.5 years when Matvei Michkov is going to add himself into that lineup. That's going to
Yep.
be a lethal duo on the power play and probably the two players that will get the most puck touches on that power play. I also think that this really fits a need for Philadelphia, like that the defensive prospect core is not as strong as the forward prospect core is in Philly. Like on the right hand side, the other players that you really have that are going to be maybe potential impact pieces are probably limited to just Helga Grans and Oliver Bonk, right? So those are not two players that I would be overly optimistic about in terms of like top pairing upside. And
Yeah.
while Drysdale is certainly not a home run swing as a top pairing defenseman, he has that ceiling. And
Mhm.
if Philly is able to develop that and give him the ice time and insulate him for the first year or two to get him warmed up into that higher end role, I think he could really, really fill a need for them. So I quite like the acquisition. It is a swing and a half, especially when you compare it to like the certainty that you have with Cutter Gauthier. Like, I don't think there are many worlds where Cutter Gauthier becomes anything less than an impactful second liner. And with Jamie Drysdale, there's a far wider range of potential outcomes still now, even though he's like, what, a year or two older than Gauthier and further
Yeah.
along his development path. He's quite raw still. But the upside is just as high, if not higher, than with Cutter. But injury worries are of course, a significant concern here. And we'll have to see how that continues to play out. Hopefully he's able to shake off that injury bug that's been bothering him for the past couple seasons. But I really like this fit in terms of Drysdale as a power play option and just as an addition to that defensive core and the young defensive core, the future defensive core. Like, you already
Yeah.
have like Sanheim and York that are pretty solid NHLers right now,
Yeah.
and Oliver Bonk's going to be a decent like number 3 to number 5 defenseman, depending where that upside ends up hitting.
Yeah.
But there's a lack of that elite skill, and I think that this is a really, really decent bet in terms of a not great situation overall for Philly here. Like, they were
Yeah.
not in a position to maximize value,
Yeah.
but I think they got, at the very least, a very intriguing piece in return.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get into kind of why it was Jamie Drysdale, because you look at the Anaheim Ducks decor and it's just unfair in terms of prospects. I mean, Olin Zellweger, Pavel Mintyukov, of course, on the right side. I mean, you've got Noah
Tristan
Warren,
Renault,
Tristan
Noah Warren.
Luneau, Rondo and Dianicho we can put in that conversation. Like, they have a lot of options, and I'm looking at the right side. It's not as deep as their left side. I was thinking maybe they trade an Olin Zellweger, maybe they even trade Mintyukov, but you're looking at Mintyukov's numbers right now. The way he's playing right now in Anaheim, he's not expendable at all.
No,
Like, he's
he's
done a
there,
better job on the top power play than Jamie Drysdale has when he was
which
healthy.
is saying something.
Yeah, absolutely. And you add Olin Zellweger to that mix, they've got a 1-2 punch on the top power play for the next 10, 15 years. Like, it's
Yeah.
absurd. But also it's just overall the injury issues, like we mentioned, the defensive liabilities as well have kind of made him a bit more expendable and pushed him down the pecking order. And again, Pavel Mintyukov just playing out of his mind in his rookie year. All that in combination, I feel, has made Drysdale expendable. Now, at the same time, you know, does Anaheim have to add a sweetener in that trade if they trade Zellweger or Mintyukov? I don't know. Um,
Nah.
yeah, but at the same time, like, you're looking at a player who has the potential to be a top power play quarterback, and if he stays healthy, if he's managed well, if he's paired with the right guys, I mean, Philly has some options on the left side as well they can play him with. I don't have much of a doubt. I've always believed in Drysdale's skill set, and I think that it's just a matter of time before he pans out fully. And yeah, I mean, you look at the other players in this pecking order. I understand the Anaheim side of not wanting to trade another guy, but I also understand the Philly side of really wanting a right-handed defenseman who can play on the top power play. And of the guys we mentioned, the Luneaus and Warrens and Mintyukovs and Zellwegers, the one that fits the most of that bill is Jamie Drysdale. So overall, I think it's a fantastic fit. What do you think?
I agree, and I think that, like, I mean, obviously hasn't got much attention because it's the by far the smallest piece of the 3 pieces in this deal, but adding
Yeah,
Anaheim's second round draft pick is also quite substantial. Like, that's going to be a high end pick, almost a first rounder, likely in that, what, like 34 to 38 range, which is
yeah,
a really, really valuable slot. You're seeing like some really good players get drafted in that range, and you can always get some real fallers of like quite slam dunk first round talents in that range, and you have
yeah,
quite a bit of choice among those as well. So I think adding that as well on top of Drysdale certainly softens the blow a bit of losing Gauthier in such a dramatic fashion, as we're going to discuss a bit in the final segment of the episode. But
yeah,
yeah, I think adding a high end second round draft pick, like, of course, coming from scouts, like, we're more excited about draft picks than the average hockey person is, but
yeah,
there's a lot of value to be had in that, and second round picks are the most undervalued asset in the NHL, both among like teams and general managers, but also fans. Like, second round picks are really solid bets, and Philadelphia drafted pretty damn well in the 2023 draft class. So I wouldn't be shocked if they take a home run swing with that pick come draft
yeah.
day.
Absolutely, never put it past the Ducks scouting team. They are fantastic, absolutely amazing. But yeah, that wraps things up for our second segment. We'll talk about the situation surrounding this that landed Cutter Gauthier in Anaheim, what that means for NHL prospects in the future, and overall, kind of our thoughts on the whole situation. We'll get into that after these messages from our sponsors over at Sleeper.
It's almost the halfway point of the season, but you can still get in on the action with Sleeper. Sleeper is our number one choice for your daily fantasy hockey needs and overall daily fantasy sports here at the Locked On NHL Network. It's our number one choice because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is correctly predict 8 specific player stats, and you can get creative with those, whether you want to bet on some of the stars of the league to put up some goals like the McKinnons or the Drysidles, or if you want to take a home run swing on one of the youngsters of the league, maybe on Connor Bedard once he comes back from injury, or I don't know, Adam Fantilli is playing some pretty good hockey right now as well. The choice is yours with Sleeper. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability.
Alrighty, so closing things off with our final segment here, we'll talk a bit more about the situation surrounding Cutter Gauthier going to Anaheim. This has been a long time in the works. It came as a surprise in terms of it happening on a random day in January, but overall, there were a lot of rumors surrounding Cutter Gauthier being shipped around. We didn't really know why yet. But him being absent at the training camp, at the rookie camp for Philadelphia, kind of made things a bit muddy. But then, I had heard some speculation around, Philadelphia trying to ship him off at the 2023 NHL draft table for some picks, that kind of stuff. But we'll start off with what we know happened for sure. Cutter Gauthier on draft day gets picked 5th overall in the 2022 NHL draft while shaking, the GM's hands and all that. Says something along the lines of, made to be a Philadelphia Flyer, like making a comment about how he's made to be a Flyer. A couple months later, the Flyers try to get in touch, get some information on how he's doing, how he's feeling about the whole contract situation. They don't get any answer back from either him or his agent. Later on, after the World Juniors, and after the World Championship, they tried to get a hold of him again. He wasn't really responding, and had advised the team that he wasn't really interested in talks at all with them for the moment. But after these World Juniors had just passed, from what I understand, John LeClaire and the Flyers staff try to get in a touch with him again and sit down with him, have a talk about this contract situation, and he outright told him he wasn't interested at all, and having anything to do with them for the moment. So that overall, that whole situation, it leaves a lot to the imagination and speculation, but we can imagine that Cutter Gauthier initially was psyched about being picked 5th overall, but then changed his mind about wanting to be a Flyer. I'm really interested in that whole process because how do you get there? But also, is this good or bad for hockey that prospects are starting to take things into their own hands? We saw it first with Adam Fox, really, in his,
Yeah.
when he was picked. He made it clear he wanted to play for New York regardless, and he made that happen. But, in this situation, Gauthier taking agency to his own hands, I think we're on the same page about liking players having more freedom.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, how do you feel about all this?
For sure. I mean, I think framing it as like good for hockey is already kind of fitting a specific narrative.
Yeah,
Like, yes, like for hockey fans, it sucks. It's annoying. Like if you're a Flyers fan and you've been hyped for Cutter Gauthier, this is disappointing and annoying, and
yeah,
you're gonna feel emotions about that, and you are completely fair in feeling those emotions. But Cutter Gauthier is a 19-year-old kid, and he didn't want to play for Philly or live in Philly or whatever. He had his own reasons, and I think of course, like workers' rights, but like specifically for like very, very young players, like they're still teenagers. Can you really expect them to communicate that like maturely? Yes, Cutter Gauthier did not exactly handle all of this with grace from what we're seeing right now as like the first impressions
yeah.
of this whole situation that's still very much being untangled. But I don't think that cancels out his right to determine where he wants to go, where he wants to play. And it wasn't like he forced his way to Anaheim specifically. It wasn't like Adam Fox, where it's like, I will not play for any team but this team. It was just a thing of he didn't want to play for that organization. And
Mhm.
that could be for a variety of reasons, including the fact that he grew up a Pittsburgh Penguins fan. And there might
Yeah.
just be enough animosity in the family that he just didn't want to do it in the end. And hey, that's a lot of like intensity and emotion for a hockey player that like I don't mind that he like forced his way out in this way, but
Yeah.
like the decision itself I think is a fair one. The way it was communicated kind of is
Yeah.
sucky for a lot of people, but
Definitely.
I don't think that removes the value and the importance of people deciding where they want to work. Like you posted this on Twitter today, right?
Yeah.
Like if this were any other like realm, like workplace, if you're an employee that has not even like signed a contract with your employer yet, they just basically picked you out of a lot of people and were like, you work for us now. And then you decide to work for another company. And then every single like customer of that first company is like pitchforks and calling for your head for it. It's like, that's very intense for a 19-year-old kid to have to deal
Yeah.
with.
Absolutely. And the
But
other side of that is like,
it's the reality of hockey. It's intense. It's
yeah.
really, really, really intense.
Yeah, and the other side of that, though, we're not really kind of seeing talked about at all, is the fact that everyone involved here is getting like death threats and
Oh
like
my,
having.
it's
I mean,
insane.
the fallout on Kevin Hayes, who had absolutely nothing to do with this, by the way, like just a complete outsider to this whole situation. Like people are calling,
he was a mentor for Cutter Gauthier, right? Like they've been in
yeah,
contact, but like
yeah.
if he gave him advice of like, oh, here's a tidbit about the organization that I had a bad experience with, that's him sharing and being transparent, not like
Yeah, that's
yeah,
not that's not on him for saying that. It's on the organization for doing that. You know what I mean? Like, regardless of what it was, I feel like the situation with Kevin Hayes. I mean, people were saying that they're glad his brother's dead. Like, that's not something you can say to another human being, like at
yeah.
all. This is completely blown out of proportion. And the fallout for Cutter Goche, I'm scared for this kid. Like, we know how Philly is. We know
Philly
how
is
fans.
is
Yeah, we know
Philly.
how fans are there, and we love the passion. We adore it. But the fallout on this kid is going to be scary. It's going to be hard to watch. Like anytime the Ducks come to town, it's going to be very, very difficult for this kid to have like a good time. And yeah, overall, I mean, everything about this is I feel is blown out of proportion because again, this is a 19-year-old kid who, yeah, changed his mind. He's being called a spoiled, whiny, entitled brat online. Like there are actual like color commentators and analysts like calling him names on live TV and stuff. And like he's a 19-year-old kid who didn't choose to get drafted by this team. Again, I completely agree that he could have handled this differently. I just can't say for certain that 19-year-old me would have done any better in that situation.
Exactly.
And I don't
Yeah.
think anyone here can. So it's a
No.
matter of making sure that you keep that in consideration and understand that this is a human being who maybe just did not want to play in Philly. His family is Pens fans. We don't know what the reasons are, but it can be something along those lines. And whatever the reason is, that's okay. That's part of the process. If you're going to draft out of the NCAA pipeline, you need to keep these things in mind that it's a possibility that you'll get, shot in the foot with this kind of situation. We saw it
Yeah.
with Fox. We saw it with a lot of previous prospects. It's a reality of the industry. People saying like, oh, it's part of the business. If you want to if you're drafted by a team, they wanted you, it's your responsibility to you know it's part of the business. To get drafted by a team, you don't get and say a say in where you go. But like it's also part of the business that there's an NCAA clause that says that you can stay in the NCAA for 4 years, age out of your eligibility as an NHL draftee, and then hit the
Yeah.
free agent market if you want. It's part of
Yeah.
the business. That goes both ways. And I feel like the prospects taking that matter into their own hands is fantastic for the sport because, well, not for the sport. It's not fantastic for fans. It's fantastic for the human beings
The human
that are
beings. Yeah.
signing these contracts because again, these are people and they should be allowed to have agency as to where they work. When you're that good at hockey, you should be able to have a say in where you go, even if you lose
And
a couple of.
anyone should have a say of where they go in terms of work, right? Like, I
Yeah,
think if
absolutely.
we were having this conversation of just like a friend that we know that like wanted to change workplaces, we wouldn't be hearing pitchforks of like,
Like calling him a spoiled whiny brat. Like it just
you are a
makes me sick.
traitor to this organization, to this company. How dare you, right? Like, it's
Yeah,
like
I
the
understand the
more the
fanhood.
moralization of this decision is rather intense.
Absolutely, and I just really hope that things cool down on Gauthier's side because again, this is a 19-year-old kid who made a
Yeah.
decision for his future and for his comfort and his his workplace stability. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes of Philadelphia. We don't know why. We don't know what things he might have heard to make him not want to play for that team at all and not even respond to calls from Danny Briere and John Leclerc. Like, I don't know, man. If Danny Briere or John Leclerc call me tomorrow, I'm answering the damn phone. Like, but it is what it is. But either way, that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in tomorrow as we talk a bit more about some drafted prospects post World Juniors, how the World Juniors might have affected our rankings, and what we'll see in our rankings moving forward. This has been Hadi Kalakesh to Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.